I found out my wife had an escape plan in case our marriage failed, so I made a better one. I thought my marriage was fine, until I found a hidden document in my wife's Google Drive detailing exactly how she planned to leave me. And that's when I decided to make my own plan too. I'm not a perfect husband. None of us are. But in my mind, Laura and I had a stable marriage. 6 years together, a comfortable home, weekly dinners at our favorite restaurants. Sure, sometimes we argued, sometimes work stressed us out, but who doesn't go through that? Turns out, my wife apparently didn't see our marriage the same way. I found out everything by accident. Her MacBook broke, and since I know a bit about tech, she asked me to take a look. As soon as I turned it on, it opened directly to her Google Drive. That's when I saw a document titled Plan B. I got curious. I don't usually snoop through her stuff, but something about it seemed suspicious. I opened the file, and immediately, my stomach sank. Plan B was a detailed script of how Laura would break up with me if our marriage didn't work out. She had even written out the perfect excuse to make herself the victim. It said she felt that we had grown apart, and that she needed a fresh start. There were also links to apartments saved on Zillow, all set up for her to move out without any hassle. The most disgusting part? She had already written the breakup message she intended to send me, something short and direct, leaving no room for discussion. As if that wasn't enough, she listed everything she planned to take when she left, and some of those things were mine. But the detail that made me want to laugh nervously was the timing she chose to break up, right after a trip I had already paid for. As she wrote in the document, if it's already paid for, why not enjoy it? I wanted to throw up. This wasn't just a passing thought. It was a complete, ready-to-execute plan. I closed the laptop and tried to act like nothing had happened. My mind was racing. How long had she been thinking about this? Since when was our marriage just an expiration date waiting to happen? I needed to act. But confronting Laura right away wasn't the best option. If she already had an escape plan, any wrong move could make her speed up the process. And with the way she had thought of everything, I could end up being the one at a disadvantage. So, I decided to do something better. If she had a plan B, I would have a plan C. And the first thing I did was set up a coffee meeting with my best friend, who luckily, or by fate, is a divorce attorney. I sat at the table with him, took out my phone, and opened the file I had copied from her computer. You won't believe what I found. He read everything and let out a whistle. Man, this is strategic. She even has the emotional justification ready. Have you noticed any changes in her behavior? I sighed. Now that he mentioned it. Yes, I had noticed. Laura had been different for months. It wasn't something obvious, but looking back, it was impossible to ignore. She was never that attached to her phone, but lately, she wouldn't put it down for a second. Before, she would leave it lying around the house without a care. Now, she took it even to the bathroom. Suddenly, she started going out more. At first, it was always with the same coworkers, but over time, new happy hours popped up every week with people I had never heard of. When I asked who they were, she just gave a vague, work friends, answer without naming names. Besides that, everything I did started to annoy her. If before she only complained when I forgot to take out the trash, now she made a point of saying I didn't even know how to take care of my own house. At the time, I thought it was just work stress, but now it all made sense. She was distancing herself little by little, because she already had a plan in place to discard me. If you react now, she might change her approach and screw you over in another way, my friend said. The best thing is to let her follow her own plan, while making the right moves to turn it against her. I left that conversation with two certainties. I needed to act fast, but I had to do it the right way. That night, Laura came home as if nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked how my day was, and then flopped on the couch to watch TV. The natural way she acted gave me chills. While she watched her show, I sat beside her and observed. Was she testing me? Or in her mind, had she already discarded me and was just waiting for the right moment to make it official? Then I had a thought. What if I did it first? After that conversation with my friend, I started seeing everything differently. Every little action of Laura's now seemed calculated, as if she were following a script only she knew. The problem? Now I knew that script too. I waited to see how far she would go, and it didn't take long to realize that the plan was already in motion. She started acting strangely. Some days, she was cold and distant, as if she was already emotionally out of the marriage. Other days, she tried too hard to be affectionate, as if she wanted to convince me that everything was fine. But what really confirmed everything for me was when she suggested we take a vacation together. The moment she said it, I knew that was the final step in her plan. It'll be good for us, she said, with a rehearsed-looking smile. We've been so stressed, a trip could help. I almost laughed in her face. If I hadn't seen the document, I would have fallen right into her trap. But I already knew that, in her plan, this trip wasn't about making things better. It was her farewell trip, paid for by me. That's when I decided to flip the game. I agreed to the trip, but now, instead of seeing it as a time to relax, I saw it as the final scene of her grand act. And I would be the director of this play. But before that, I had to make sure I got out of this without losing anything. In the following days, I started setting up my own plan without her suspecting a thing. I spoke to my lawyer and took all the necessary precautions to ensure that, when the bomb dropped, she wouldn't take anything that wasn't hers. I opened a new bank account and transferred most of my money there, leaving just enough in our shared accounts to avoid suspicion. I removed my name from some joint expenses and, with my lawyer's help, prepared all the necessary paperwork for a quick separation. And then, the day of the trip arrived. Laura was radiant. She looked like the happiest woman in the world as she packed her bags and picked out the perfect outfits for Instagram photos. Little did she know that she was about to become the main character in a very different kind of viral story. The trip was to Miami, a destination she had always wanted to visit. I remained calm, but inside, I was counting down the minutes to my final move. In the last evening of the trip, as we sat in an elegant beachfront restaurant, I looked her in the eyes and said, with the calmest voice in the world, "Laura, I've been thinking a lot about our marriage." She stopped mid-sip of her wine and smiled. It was the moment she had planned. "Me too," she said, holding my hand with a sparkle in her eyes. "I think we really need to reconsider some things." Obviously, she thought she had everything under control, but I continued, "Yes, and I've made a decision." Her eyes lit up with excitement, expecting me to steer the conversation exactly where she wanted. "I want a divorce." Her smile disappeared instantly. For a moment, it was as if her brain had frozen, as if her script had been erased, and she no longer knew what to say. "What? I want a divorce," I repeated, picking up my glass and taking a sip of wine. "I think we've grown apart. I need a fresh start." Her expression was pure confusion. It was as if I had just stolen her lines. But why now? We didn't even talk about this." The calmness in my voice must have killed her inside. "You're right." I pulled out my phone and opened a document in Google Drive. Maybe I should have written a detailed plan first, just like you did. The panic on her face was priceless. She turned completely pale. "You what?" I placed my phone on the table and slid it toward her. It was an exact copy of her Plan B. And then, what had once been confusion turned into pure despair. She tried to deny it. She tried to say it was nothing serious, that it didn't mean anything. But deep down, she knew she was done. The difference between us? I had already taken care of everything. My lawyer had the papers ready. Laura would walk away from this divorce with nothing more than what was hers. And now, the only person left without solid ground was her. Laura was speechless. She opened her mouth a few times, trying to come up with an excuse, but nothing made sense. The panic in her eyes said it all. "How did you?" she murmured, staring at my phone screen where her Plan B was open. I just smiled. "You should have protected your files better." Her expression shifted from shock to anger. "You invaded my privacy? Oh, so now you want to talk about respect?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because from what I read, it doesn't seem like I was exactly on your list of priorities." She huffed, throwing her napkin on the table. "It wasn't anything serious. It was just a contingency plan." I let out a short laugh and shook my head. "Laura, no one writes a complete plan, picks an apartment, calculates the best time to break up, and hides everything in Google Drive just for precaution." She crossed her arms, clearly frustrated that the game had turned against her. "So what? You're breaking up with me too? How does that make you any better than me?" The difference was that I hadn't spent months pretending everything was fine while planning to drain every last cent before walking out the door. But I knew arguing with her at that moment was pointless. So, I simply leaned back in my chair and let the final blow land. "The difference, Laura, is that I've already taken all the necessary steps to make this separation fair. My lawyer has taken care of everything. The paperwork is ready, and you won't walk away with anything more than what's yours." Her eyes widened. "What? You heard me." I reached into my jacket pocket and placed an envelope on the table. "Here are the documents. The lawyer has already sent a digital copy to your email. You can sign whenever you want, but know that there's not much to discuss." She grabbed the envelope as if it were a ticking time bomb. You set all this up against me?" "Oh, but wasn't that exactly what you were trying to do to me?" I gave a sarcastic smile. "The difference is that I did it better." Laura turned red with rage. She looked around, realizing that some people in the restaurant were starting to notice our heated conversation. "You're a bastard," she hissed, lowering her voice. "Maybe," I shrugged. "But at least I'm not a leech planning to leave after a trip paid for by someone else." She was at a loss for words. For the first time, she seemed to understand that she had lost. "Enjoy your new apartment," I added, picking up my wine glass and finishing my drink. "Oh, and I hope you have a plan C, because that Plan B failed." I stood up, left enough money on the table to cover my dinner, and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. In the following days, Laura tried to contact me. Calls, messages, even emails. I ignored them all. I had nothing left to say to her. Some of her friends also tried to message me, probably wanting to understand what happened, but I ignored them too. The only time I responded was when Laura sent me one last email, saying I was being childish for not talking to her, and that we should resolve this like adults. I replied with just one sentence. Adults don't make secret plans to abandon someone. After that, total silence. 2 months later, I heard from a mutual friend that Laura was living alone in the same apartment she had saved in her plan. It seems she really followed her own script, just without the benefits she expected. And me? Well, I took my own vacation after that. Only this time, without having to pay for anyone else. If there's one thing this story taught me, it's that if someone already has a plan to discard you, always be one step ahead. What would you have done in my place?